Hello, my name is T. Josh. I'm a Protection Warrior. I've been playing since Vanilla, and I've been tanking since Burning Crusade. I decided to do a tier list on the raid bosses of the last expansion as a Prot Warrior perspective, who is mostly heroic raiding experience. I've done Mythic in the past, but this is a more casual look at things. I haven't done Mythic since BFA, and I figured I would give my opinions out there. There's not a ton of more casual tank perspectives, specifically as a Prot Warrior, and I figured why not show my perspective on things. And yeah, not everyone's gonna agree. This is definitely a different view of things, but I wanted to get my opinions out there, and let us start. The tiers are for like S tier. I have like some of the best fights ever, in my opinion, obviously. Then I got the great fights, and then the good fights, and then average or boring things that are just not interesting, but not maybe not bad, but maybe missing things to really spice them up. And then the fights that I really don't like, just not a fan. So let's start with the first fight of the first raid, which is Aranog. I actually like Aranog a lot. I'm going to put him in good. I liked, as a first boss, he definitely gets you into the raid. It's, as a Prot Warrior, there's a little bit of moving, a little bit of running around to get the ads uh, when they're closing in, but nothing crazy, nothing substantial. Just the first boss, get you into the raid. Even on Heroic, there's zero differences basically. It was very standard, honestly. I probably could have done it on Mythic without much worry because the mechanics are not much crazier on Mythic. But I did enjoy the fight. I thought it was a good fight. I thought that for the first boss of the expansion, they did a good job getting you into the feel of what is coming. So for the second boss, we actually progressed towards Taros. And Taros, I thought was a great fight. I really enjoyed Taros. The mechanics for the warrior, as like a tank, I felt like it was. I had to be smart to use my cooldowns. I had to plan around when the raid was taking damage. I had to switch stances a lot to do more damage early, but then when the damage started ramping up, to switch to defensive stance, take less damage. Um, it was a very fun fight. I really like these kind of fights where it's kind of a little bit of movement every once in a while, and but mostly standing still, doing a few mechanics. Very fun fight. Uh, I had a ton of fun with it. Watching guildmates accidentally falling into the hole in the center is also always great. Um, but yeah, I thought it was a great fight. I enjoyed it a lot. So then we went to Senarth, and I know this is going to be a somewhat controversial take, but I think Senarth was a great fight, in my opinion. I loved how it slowly climbed up the platform. I loved that you could basically just ignore the tiny ads, but then the big ads you had to focus. Uh, I liked tank swap. I liked the pull. It worked really well for me because I could just rogue leap away from the boss whenever it's in the pull, or just hide behind pillars if I was in a good spot to do that. I liked the top phase. I was the last one alive a lot of times. I liked just the entire fight, the sliding around. I was not really bad at it. I know some people aren't great with it. They don't like the ice, but I thought it was fun. It was very different, very unique. They don't do bosses like that very often. And all in all, I really enjoyed the fight. I just wish it wasn't so cheesable later in the expansion when everyone was doing a ton of DPS. and you like kill it before you even got to the top. But other than that, the fight was a lot of fun in my opinion. I know some people didn't like it, especially the casters, because the moving around and stuff, but as a Prot Warrior, I thought it was a great fight. And now for a somewhat other controversial opinion, the Primal Console next. And I did not like that one that much. Not that I hated it. Early on in progression, it was a little too hectic. People accidentally giving fire circles to everyone. People just not interrupting. The fight itself wasn't bad. It was very, if you had the DPS, it was very easy. It was just while we were progressing, it just it was kind of a mess. I don't like fights where things just feel messy, and that fight just feels messy if things aren't going well, especially in heroic. Things always seem to like go a little crazy at some points. So I don't think our strategy was the best either. We probably could have improved on that a little bit, but in general, it just felt like a messy fight. And I don't like console fights where everyone has to die at the same time kind of things, because you always mess something up. So, but all in all, it wasn't a bad fight. It was pretty easy, especially later on in the expansion. After we progressed through it, like we never had much issues with it again. Even in season 4, I think we probably wiped on it once or twice, and then we got into a rhythm and it was fine. So, and then we have Dathia, which is one of my least favorite fights in the entire expansion, and one of my least favorite fights in the entire game. As a Prot Warrior, if there wasn't other stuff going on, the fight itself would have been fine. I like the knockback mechanic. I like the suck mechanic. I like the tornadoes. It's just the ads and then on heroic the platforms just weren't fun. They kept switching on who would go to the platforms, which tank, and it just never worked out. People just weren't very good at it. The only times we could ever beat it is if we just zerg the boss, which ended up working just way better most of the time anyway. I know if we did Mythic, we'd have to do the platforms, but I'm glad we didn't have to do that. Just, it was just, not that there was a lot going on, it was just hard to coordinate everything well. I mean, when we had it set up so the other tank would take the ad and I would just take the boss because I had just had so many ways of getting back to it. That was kind of fun when we were zerking it down, but it just I just didn't enjoy the fight. I thought it was a pretty bad fight. I don't think this is a crazy controversial opinion, but I just there was just so much more they could have done with it if they just kept it to the single platform like normal. Like normal was fine. Normal wasn't that bad. It just not a fun fight. I really wish they could have improved upon some of the things. Like even the knockbacks weren't bad if we didn't have to get knocked to other platforms, and the ads didn't have to keep getting interrupted and all of that. It was just the design decisions were just all over the place. Then we have, let's see, Kurok. Kurok I thought was fine, average. Um, Nothing to complain about for the fight. There's a lot going on, even in heroic, like especially in heroic, but not so much that it got crazy. We didn't have too much trouble with it. Like we had a little bit of trouble, but not to the point where it was this wall for us. Just figuring out which areas to start in and move to and everything. And we could have probably changed the strategy up to make it a little bit easier, but we kept it mostly 50, 50, 50, 50 for everything. And then we went to fire or earth mostly for the last phase, just, because we just did the best in those ones. Um, The ads were a little rough at first, but once we figured them out, we didn't have too much trouble with them either. I enjoyed the fight. The tank mechanics are fine. Nothing crazy. I do wish the ads were a little bit more interesting for tanks. Mostly it was just take one and drag them together, and that's about it. So, but all in all, fine fight. Nothing crazy, nothing wild. Then we have Diurna, and I actually think this, for me, was a good fight. I was responsible for the eggs and figuring out, like, learning the path and getting the boss over there using defenses and stuff, dragging the boss around was more interesting than when I had to do the ads. It wasn't as fun, but the boss itself, when you drag it around, second phase was boring. Yeah, I mean, there's not much going on for a tank, and the second phase just taunts every once in a while when stacks get too high. But first phase, I always felt like there was enough damage going out to keep me worried about my health, keeping the path going, making sure that it was close enough to eggs and everything. Like, it was, for me, it was fun. I understand why people don't enjoy the fight. I understand where the issues are in the fight, but as a tank, especially tanking the boss itself, I really enjoyed it. I really liked the routing of the eggs and just figuring out how to move the boss and get everything positioned. I thought that was interesting to me. Okay, so now for Razaketh. And honestly, I hate this fight. It's probably one of my least favorite end boss fights we've ever done. Um, and I've done Madness of Deathwing on Heroic. So, Razaketh, I think I have a couple of issues with this fight. The first issue is that the first phase feels way harder than every other phase, and you just wipe so much in the first phase, which isn't a bad thing, but when the fight is so long, and the first phase is the toughest part of it, it just feels like you're hitting a wall, like you're not making any progress. And then you finally do make some progress, and then somebody makes a mistake, and you just wipe it in another phase, and you have to get stuck in the first phase again. And I know that it's not a crazy thing, because most of the issue is people putting puzzles too close together, or too close to the boss, or not interrupting sparks, or dealing with sparks, or any of that stuff. It has not a lot to do with tanking. It's just frustrating when there's nothing to do as a tank really in the first phase, other than just deal with your sparks and taunting every once in a while. It's just really boring in the first phase, and then the second phase is a lot of nothing. Not the second phase, the first intermission. The ads are just whatever. Just avoid the breath, take the ads, keep them together, interrupt when you can. And then the second phase, well, I felt it was like a little bit easier than the first phase. It was still not free because of the polarity thing. Once again, there's not much for a tank to do. It's just taunt and then deal with your polarity and stuff. The second intermission, I thought was a cool intermission, but did we need two intermissions on this fight? It was so long to begin with, and it didn't feel hard once everyone knew what to do. It felt so simple, on normal especially, but in heroic even, it didn't feel hard when we had a couple people just CCing the mini ads, and then we just blow them up, and then just deal with the big ads. Kill one, once one's down, it was free. And then the last phase, I think we wiped on the last phase twice ever. It was so easy. And once again, there was still nothing for tanks to do. It was just a simple taunt swap. Like, it was just not a fun fight. It felt weird that you wiped on the first phase more than anything else. It felt weird that the last phase was literally free. It was a weird fight. I just, if it was like 2 to 3 minutes shorter, it probably would have been better. Like, get rid of that first intermission, it probably would have felt a lot better. But all in all, I just didn't enjoy it very much. So now we go to the second raid where we have Kazara. Kazara, I thought was average, not boring. I liked some of the ideas of it. I do know when we started progressing heroic, our guild was very much not ready for that, and we had a lot of trouble with it for no reason. But once we did get it, it was we never had issues with it again. And I mean, first fights of a raid shouldn't be crazy. It was weird that we had some issues with it at first, but like I said, once we got it down once, we had no issues ever again with it. I do like the fact that the armor comes off and like the damage goes up and everything. I thought that was interesting. I thought the DPS mechanic was kind of cool with the lasers. The tanks didn't really have anything to do with that. Just had to position it well, move it if it got too busy in the areas. But I just thought it was fine. Nothing crazy, nothing interesting. They could have done more with it. So after that, we have so we went to Amalgamation Chamber next. I really liked Amalgamation Chamber. I thought that the fact that there was multiple ways of doing it was really cool. I thought that the two different phases were interesting. Like the one phase we keep everyone separated, and you got stacks of one thing, and you're supposed to swap off. Even as a tank, when we first beat it, we just had the tanks stay on each one separately, and then just use defensives to get through the high stacks. And later on, when you got more gear, we just burned one really quick. Like it was a cool fight that changed how you played depending on what kind of strat you wanted to use. We tried like the just swapping the two bosses from side to side. We tried swapping people. Like it was cool that there was multiple ways to do it. In the fight itself, the mechanics were interesting, especially the second phase when you had to like jump away from the boss. When you did the big explosion, you had to soak things. Like I thought it was just a cool fight, especially for the second fight. One of the two second fights that you could do. Just interesting all around. Then the experiments, I thought it was average. It was it was a weird uh, tank mechanic where you would get stacks and then you would have to walk into the other tank to blow up. And you don't want to get too many stacks because then it would blow up bigger and it would hurt you more if you had too many stacks. One of the reasons why I didn't enjoy that too much was if you killed the boss and you still had a bunch of stacks on you, especially for me as a Prot Warrior, there was not much I could do about it. Like I couldn't use any defensives. I had no way of gaining rage to mitigate the damage. So a lot of times I would just sit there and take a ton of damage while waiting for the next boss to spawn. The town time was kind of annoying. Um, and until the third boss, there really wasn't a lot of different things to do as a tank other than the one tank mechanic. The third one was interesting. I did like the flying around. I didn't like the fact that people didn't know how to deal with the orbs really well, but for the most part, if we got to the last phase, we usually won. So that was it was fine. Not a crazy hard fight, but nothing special. The next was the Kali Assault, and I think it was fine. Once again, nothing crazy. It was really easy. I think we wiped maybe once on it because we accidentally let too many casts of the the shaman guy go off. But once we did that, the only times we wiped was when we accidentally like didn't grab all the ads on one side or something, and then we could eventually we just did the burn strat where everyone just went to one side and burned the boss real quick. Like it's kind of cool that you could do that too, but it just wasn't much of a interesting fight. It was just split the raid, go to each side, kill a few ads, take the boss when he jumps over, kill a few more ads, go to the center, stack into two groups. That's it. Not that it was a bad fight. It was just very easy, very simple, and not anything creative mechanically really. But on that note, we have Rashok, which was one of my favorite fights in the expansion. It had a really cool tank mechanic where you had to see which abilities were going off, and you couldn't take two of the same ones. It had on her like you had to avoid the black orbs coming out. You had to make sure to drag the boss in the center when it got close to max. Like when we first progressing on this, we didn't have the DPS to do it, to drag it in like early. We had to wait until it got to like 98, 99 energy to drag it in to make sure we had as much DPS as possible. Obviously, a few times later, we never had to worry about that again. But the first time fighting him, it was tight. Um, and the fight itself is just interesting. It's always slightly different depending on where people drop the puddles. In just avoiding orbs. The second phase is always a fun time, just avoiding things and just trying to do as much damage as possible, even as a tank. Like, I always enjoy the fight. I thought it was fun. I thought it was for a single target boss with no ads or anything. They did a really good job with it. But on the other hand, this Karn is probably my least favorite fight in the expansion. I know I said Dathia was one of the worst fights. This Karn is. I hated that fight. The tank mechanic was like nothing. It was just the stacks, but it also like expected you to get bombs. At least at first we thought that, but then we just switched it to like paladins grabbing bombs with immunities and stuff. Like tanks grab them when they could, but never focused it if we were trying to like focus on when to taunt swap and everything. Like, and then the traps, people never really seem to understand the traps. People would always stand in them and take extra, like, so much extra damage. The explosions, people always seem to get killed by those. People just weren't killing the ads, getting rid of traps or getting rid of the wrong traps. It was just, even though the tank stuff wasn't crazy, it just felt like a mess of a fight. You know, if you did the wrong traps, like getting rid of the wrong traps or just getting unlucky, sometimes you just felt like you were cornered into really bad spots near the end of the fight. It just felt like a mess. And while it wasn't the worst, it just wasn't that much fun. So next is Magmarex. I put it average. It was fine. I had no issues with it, but as a raid, I think we wiped maybe twice on it because we didn't really understand. Like people would just not stack, or people wouldn't soak things or miss the soaks. But the tank mechanic is just a simple tank swap. You would get knocked back every once in a while, which never bothered me because it's charge or heroic leap. Uh, just very simple. It was just kind of weird where Rashok was like such a good single target fight in Magmarex. Well, like I said, I don't think it's a bad fight. It just wasn't anything special. It's just very plain. And like as a tank, it did not do a lot. Like we would take a soak if it was near us, but that was about it. It wasn't any crazy positioning, it wasn't any crazy avoiding things. It was just stand there for the most part. Notharian, so maybe a controversial take, but also this, I was only doing heroic. I didn't have to deal with a lot of the other mechanics because I was a tank. I thought this was a great fight. The tank mechanics were very unique. First phase, having to get knocked through the walls, and then positioning the boss. Second phase, getting you knocked out of your body to run through the walls so you can break open to that next adds. Third phase, probably the least interesting because it was another knockback, but you didn't want to break the wall this time. So you just got knocked back into the wall. It was, for the most part, it was just a very interesting mechanical fight where a lot of it had to do with positioning for the tanks, and the tank swaps were interesting. I really think that this raid did some really interesting tank swaps for the most part, and tank mechanics. And Eltharion was a good example of that. Each phase felt different. Each phase felt unique in like how they worked and how the walls interacted and how the boss interacted with everything going on. I thought it was just a really cool fight in general. I know Mystic had its own issues, but I only did normal and heroic, and I thought that it was done really, really well on those, especially from a tank perspective. And then we have Sarkareth. I thought he was a great fight also. I know we didn't kill him on season 2. I did do a bunch of attempts, like guild progressed on him, um, and I tried getting into some pugs and stuff too, but we did beat him on season 4, and we did get to the last phase many times in season 2. So the reason why I think it's a great fight is the tank mechanics, once again, are super unique, super interesting. I do think the last phase is a little bit too much going on, but I don't think that it's a bad thing when the fight isn't crazy long and it's the last fight. The first phase was kind of free though. We never had too much issues with the first phase. I, like every once in a while, someone wouldn't get their debuff cleared, but for the most part, the first phase was fine. And even as a tank, it wasn't like crazy. Once you get to the second phase, when you had to start running away, and you had to position things for like the ads and avoid the breath, it was like that was when the fight started feeling like it was like a really good fight. And the third phase, even then, as a tank, like having to get hit and then go down to the underground by absorbing the falling stars was really cool. The looks of the fight was incredible. The Some of the mechanics were like hiding behind the rocks and dragging to the center to be able to run all the way to the edges of the room. Like it was just really well done. But like I said, I do know the last phase had a lot going on, and if you were upstairs a lot, especially a lot of the DPS, it was just kind of crazy trying to avoid everything. But as a tank, I thought that the tank mechanics were done really well. I thought that the boss, for a last boss, was really well done. And I hope we get more bosses like Sarkareth, where it does ramp up in difficulty each phase, but it's a shorter fight. And the last phase, I'm even fine with it being kind of crazy if it's like not crazy long like Sarkareth was. So then the last raid. So you have Narrowroot is the first boss. I thought it was a good boss. I thought that the first phase with getting the ads and just grabbing them all together with the boss was kind of cool. The second phase, while it did go immune, it did have the damage amp phase, which was just a lot of fun, even as a tank. Just going crazy. Nothing crazy, but once again, first fight of a raid. I wasn't expecting anything insane for the fight, so I thought they did a good job with it. Um, I've always liked first fights a lot. I know that there are some really bad first fights, like Hellfire Citadel's first fight, but in general, I think first fights are good ways to get you into a raid. They always feel like beatable challenges that just make you feel amped for what's going on in the rest of the raid. In this current raid, I felt kind of similar. I know it's immune for way too long for this new one, but in general, it's a decent first raid fight. So now, so for second fight, we have Akira. Akira was average. I think it was mostly just kind of boring. As a tank, there's not a lot that you do. Just when you get one of the weapons, you have to split soaks, and that's about it. Nothing crazy. Just position it correctly and then just stand there for most of the fight. Just not a super interesting fight. I don't know. I just thought it was kind of boring. There wasn't anything crazy mechanically. It was never a really hard fight. We went a couple times when progressing, but nothing unheroic, but never had much issues after we beat it the first time. So we went to Volacross next, and I didn't. So I didn't like Volacross, but I didn't hate him so much that he would be in the bottom tier. He's probably lower than everyone else in the average tier. It was just kind of weird how you split the group, and then you have to like avoid some things, and then soak some things, and then taunt every once in a while. It just, I don't know. It wasn't an interesting fight to me. I thought they could have done better with some of the mechanics, but we had like zero issues with this fight. We beat it like maybe second attempt, and eventually you just get so fast that you're beating it like halfway through, like around the area. It just felt like kind of a nothing burger. So then there's Laredar. Laredar, I thought was good. I liked some of the mechanics the fight had with the fire, feeling like you're getting slowly more enclosed. I know I didn't have much to do with the fire other than like making sure he didn't spread it too much. When he charged, make sure he was positioned in good spots. Making sure that he was, especially heroic, make sure he's positioned the way so you can grab the orbs, so that people don't have to step in the fire for that. Last phase I thought was kind of cool with the you get a debuff, and the only way to get to be healed after that is by standing near other people and getting the heals off of them. I thought that was kind of cool. But we had some issues with the fight, but it was never like anything crazy. It was more just getting too much fire on the ground, just figuring out how to deal with that. Every once in a while, we had some issues where I would like take too much damage because I didn't pop the defense correctly when I was running away, but never an issue. It was more of a just learning fight, I feel. Once we got it, we never had too many issues again, as long as the people who knew what they were doing with the fire hose. So then Dream Council, I didn't like that fight that much either. Not that it was, once again, a bad fight. It was just weird how the bosses worked. It was like all about dragging the bear guy onto mostly the elk lady. And I don't know. It just felt weird. People would accidentally stand in front of the boss with the cleave. Once we figured out how to work the cleave, it got better, We didn't have as many people getting accidentally hit by the cleave, but it still felt messy, and those could have been on us as tanks. It's hard to tell. The fight was just kind of all over the place, I felt sometimes. The mechanics were kind of cool with like how they interacted with each other and stuff, but not so much that it made the fight fun for me. It just felt, I don't know, kind of all over the place. Naimu, once again, I would say kind of average. This one above Cross on Dream Console though. I thought that the fight itself, as a tank perspective, was fine. The bomb mechanic, when you got two bombs as the tank, was annoying, especially if a lot of melee DPS would put it in the spots that were designated for where I was supposed to be going. Not that that ever had too many issues, but it just felt like people would put the bombs in bad spots, or people wouldn't soak enough flowers. People would get hit by the stuns and just die. I mean, I would admit, the first time we fought the boss, I got hit by the stuns because I just didn't see them, I guess. I don't know. It was just weird. I felt like, even though it wasn't a lot going on, I think I heroically leaped into one once also because you're just trying to get back to the boss and then, oh, there's a stun. But I enjoyed it more than Velocross and Dream Temple. I think the idea of the lines is kind of cool. I think the ad phase does kind of mix it up a little bit enough so that it doesn't feel too monotonous in the fight. I thought it was a fine fight. Just they could have it could have been. I feel like it could have been a good fight if especially if the bomb mechanic was a little bit better. So Smolderon is the one I did the least of, but I liked the fight. The only reason why I did it the least was because I missed the raids where they progressed on Smolderon. And by the time I got back, we were basically just doing controlled frack. But I did do Smolderon, and I thought that it was a cool fight. I like the positioning of the boss, making sure that the dragon close to the fire, but not too far and not too close. The tank swap where you have to run away and explode, but get back quick so that you can drop if they target you with a fire puddle. Goes behind the boss was cool. The intermission was kind of cool with avoiding the fire, making sure to grab your orbs. It was fine. It was a little messy sometimes if people put fires in bad spots, but for the most part, it was just a fine fight. Nothing crazy. Nothing. It didn't wow me like the great fights, but it didn't like bore me or feel mediocre like the average fight. But then Tindril, I thought Tindril was a great fight. Um, Tindril to me was a very good ultimate fight. As a tank, there wasn't a ton going on, but there was still enough to make me feel like I was doing something all the time. I was looking out for mushrooms. I was looking to track the boss to good positioning, looking to help burn down the roots, and flying around when we had to fly. Like, there was always enough going on to feel like there was something that I was doing that was important. And it didn't feel like I was just holding the boss to hold the boss. The flying mechanic was done pretty well, I feel. I don't think it was perfect, but I think they did a good enough job that I'm glad that they reintroduced it in the dungeon fight in the current expansion. and I hope they use it maybe in one fight in a raid in this expansion. I don't want them to go overboard with it. I don't think Dragonflying should be this thing that is just done all of the time. But I feel like they can do some interesting things with it, especially now that they have. Maybe they could use like the abilities that they use in the quest line where you like attack the big golem guy in the water. Would be cool if it was like a short, very, very short thing, but in general, I thought the Tyndall fight was good. I really enjoyed it. Probably my favorite of the penultimate. I'll rearrange the things when I put this last boss, which is Farak. I put Farak in great also. I think that there is enough going on as a tank. I feel like Starkreath is better as a tank than Farak. I think that it has its issues also, but I still really enjoyed the fight. I thought that they did a good job with it, that they made sure to make the boss feel like the fight was ramping up every single phase. I do feel like the first intermission was kind of whatever. Well, it's the only intermission, but that intermission was just, ooh, you just have to deal damage and grab orbs, woohoo. It was just, I felt like nothing. And the first phase was kind of nothing also. I think we only wiped like in the entirety of it with like twice because people just drop their fires in really bad places. And that was about the only reason why we ever wiped in phase one. Um, in phase two and phase three, I feel like we wiped a moderate amount. Nothing crazy. I feel like phase two did do a lot of damage. It did make me have to play my cooldowns, especially if I still had the Infernal on me when he jumped back to me. I would take a ton of damage sometimes if I had to use cooldowns or externals. Uh, but the last phase, I didn't have to do the scene mechanics, so I don't have much of an opinion on that other than it wiped us a bunch. But as a tank, it was cool that you could kind of just take the boss the whole time as long as you have enough cooldowns. If like the other tank was just taking a lot of damage and they ran out of cooldowns, you could just taunt whenever. Like I liked that idea to a point, but it did make it feel like if you weren't the main tank, you're just kind of waiting to see if the other tank was going to run out of cooldowns or if they're going to be spiking in damage, then you just take it, like, which is fine. It just felt like the entire fight felt like one tank could do a lot of the things with the main boss itself.